In this video, we are going to talk about the Imperial Vernier caliper. In this video, we're going to talk about how to read the Vernier scale, how to calibrate this measuring tool, and how to obtain different measurements. The main parts of my Vernier caliper, I have my fixed jaw right here. I have my movable jaw down here. I have my Vernier scale up top here, and I have my main scale right here. This whole part of the measuring tool is called the beam, and on the back end here, I have my depth blade. So whenever I come to a measuring tool that I'm picking up for the first time, I always want to clean it and check the calibration on it. Okay, so to clean it, all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna clean the inside and these little nubs. You can use a piece of paper, a rag, or I usually just kind of make sure there's no chips on there with my hand. And I like to do the same for the top for these rabbit ears up here as well. So then what I do is I close the jaws, and then I like to hold this up to a light. Okay, so what I do is I hold it up to a light, and then what I'm looking for is any gaps in the jaw. So what I'll see if I hold it up to the light, it should just be a straight black line. If I see any light coming through, my jaws are worn. And in the case of my Vernier calipers, these would have to be discarded if these are worn out. If you have a dial or digital, you might get away with trying to just kind of hone out the high spots. But with this Vernier scale that I can't reset my zero, this pair of calipers would be no good. So measurements here. So I'm just going to use this little tape as an example for what I can measure. So the Vernier calipers is the most versatile measuring tool that I can use. I can measure, let's say I want to measure the inside of a bore. I can do that with the rabbit ears here. Okay, so I can check the inside of bores here. I can check the outside of distances here. So I can have internal and external measurements. And then with this depth blade at the end as well, I can check the depth of different things. So let's say I wanted to check the depth from the top of this to the bottom of here. What I can do is I can rest this on here, and I can adjust this depth blade until it's touching, and then I can read the measurement here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is how I can read this measuring tool. Okay, so here we have our scale on my calipers. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look where the zero is located on the top here. Okay, so this is on my moving jaw, so this will move kind of back and forth as I go, as I get bigger or as I get smaller here. So what I want to look for first always is where this zero is located. Okay, so we'll go over this in a few examples here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to read my full inches. Okay, so I have my full inches right here. So I see 1 inch right here. I see 2 inches right here. And that goes on to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Typically what we see in these calipers is I have a 0 to 6 inch, or I have a 0 to 8 inch, 0 to 12 inch are kind of the common sizes that we'll see in machine shops. Okay, so I'm looking for my full inches first, and then from there I'm going to look at the next major graduations, which is my 100 thou. So if I look here, I have 100, 200, 300, 400, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, so up to 900 thou. And then from there, my 100 thous are broken up into some minor graduations, which are 25 thou lines. So 25, 50, and 75. Okay, so if the zero doesn't perfectly line up with one of the major graduations on the bottom, what I need to do is then I need to look at the top scale, and I need to see which one lines up next, and then that's what my reading will be. And then I add that little bit more up top to what I have down here on my major scale here. So let's do a couple examples. This is 0, 0, the 0 and the 0 are perfectly lined up. Okay, so if I look at this example right here, the first thing I always want to do is look for where my 0 is located. Okay, so I'm looking where that 0 is located, and then we can kind of break it down from here. So if I look right here, my 0 is located right here. The first thing I want to do is I want to read my full inches. Okay, so on this picture I can only see my 4 inches, which means my 3 would be somewhere back here. Okay, so my major inches would be 3 inches. The 0 right here is where I'm taking my measurement from. Okay, so I have 3 full inches. The next thing I want to do is I want to read where my 100 thou line. So I've passed 1, 2, 300 thou, and my 0 has passed my 400 thou. So my major graduations, I have 400 thou. After that, I want to read my 25 thou lines. I haven't passed any of those 25 thou lines that I can see, so I have 0 for my major graduations. But then what I want to do is I want to look, since the 0 isn't perfectly lined up with the 4 or the 25, I need to read that little bit more on the top scale here. So what I do is I start at the 0, and then what I'm looking for is 2 lines that perfectly line up with one another on the top and on the bottom scale. So if I look at this right here, the 1 is not aligned, 2 isn't aligned, 3 isn't aligned, 4 isn't, 5. Kind of as I'm getting up to 7, as I'm getting up to 8, this is getting closer. 9 is very close. 10 is close, but I would say 11 is the best answer. After I go past 11, I can see that they start to get misaligned again. So my answer here is going to be 10 or 11, and I'm going to say probably 11 would be that little bit more. So then what I do is I take all of these numbers and I add it together for my final answer of 3.411. The accuracy of these vernier calipers, it says that it's 1 thou, but as you can see, I could see any one of these 3 lines lining up. So we need to give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room in terms of which line that is. If I have a plus or minus 1 thou tolerance, I do not want to use this vernier caliper because it could be a little bit not perfectly aligned, and there's room for judgment in there. If I had a tighter tolerance, you could use a micrometer or a height gauger or something like that. Okay, so let's do a few more examples here. Again, the first thing I'm noting is where this 0 is located. Okay, so you saw the answer up there, but we'll still go through it. So I have my 0 located right here. Okay, my 0 is right here. I can see that my full inches is right here. So that means my 0 hasn't fully passed any of the inches. So I have 0 full inches. After that, I am going to read my major graduations, which is my 100 thous. As I can see right here, I haven't fully passed that quite yet. So I would have, I've fully passed the 4, but I haven't fully passed the 5. So I have 400 thou as my major graduations. Then what I want to do is my minor graduations are my 25 thou lines. So I've passed 25, 50, and I've passed 75. So I have 75 thou there. And then after that, since the 0 is not perfectly aligned with the 25 or the 100, I need to look at this top scale for two lines that line up perfectly. So if I look, the 0 is not, the 1's not, the 2's not, the 3's not, the 4 is starting to get close, 5's getting closer, 6 is very close. I would say 7 is perfectly aligned. If I go past that, they start to get more misaligned. So my full thou is about 7 thou. So I add that all together to get 482. Please disregard that extra 7 that got added on there. All right, so let's look at this example right now. So if I look right here, I'm looking where my 0 is at. And if I look right here, I can see that it's very close to this 2-inch mark, but it hasn't fully passed, or it's not fully aligned here, okay? So first thing I want to do is read my full inches. I have 2 full inches. I don't have any of the major graduations as well, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I haven't passed any of those, and I haven't passed any of my 25 thou lines. So I have 2 full inches, no major graduations, no minor graduations. So then what I come up to here is, and to read is this little bit more, okay? So I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5 is perfectly aligned. So that is 5 thou. So I take my 2 inches plus my 5 thou for my reading here. If I look at this example now, so again, let's look at my full inches, or let's look where my 0 is for my full inches. I have not passed my 1-inch mark, so that means it's at 0. So 0 full inches. My major graduations now, I've passed 700 thou, and I've passed 800 thou, okay? So that means I have 800 thou. I haven't passed any of my minor 25 thou graduations. So then I come up here to my little bit more, okay? And I'm going to start at the 0 and go right until I see one that perfectly lines up, which is my 15. So what I do is I take my 800 thou plus my 15 thou, and I get my 815 answer here. Let's do a couple more examples here. So if I look, again, where my 0 is, I haven't passed any of my full inches, so that would be 0 full inches. From there, my major graduations, I'm at my 200 thou. Okay, my 0 is past my 200 thou. My minor graduations, the 0 is perfectly aligned with this 225 line. So I don't have to read anything up top here since the 0 is perfectly aligned. My answer for this would just be 225 thou. All right, let's look at this example right now. So if I look here, I have my full inches. So my 0 has passed my 4-inch mark. Okay, so I have 4 full inches. My 0 has not passed any of my major graduations, but it has passed 1, 2 of my minor graduations. So on my main scale, I have 4 inches and 50 thou. And then what I want to do is add that little bit more up top. So I have 4 inches, 50 thou, plus what I have up here, which is, again, I'm starting at my 0, working my way to the right, seeing which line lines up, and it's my 7. So I have 4 inches and 57 thou. I hope this video has given you some more clarity, and you are now able to read these Imperial Vernier calipers. Thanks.